Hello and welcome to Taking Liberties episode 29. My name's Lee. I am from Western Australia. This week I'm joined by Tim from Victoria.
Hey.
And Vickers from Canberra, the belly of the beast. And this week we're talking penalty rates and we're going to talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership because both are in the news. So this week we've seen some discussion around a call. I think it was the Productivity Commission started the call and then Liberal politicians have followed up with a bit of...
and the business lobby as well.
Yep, talking about penalty rates for weekend, particularly for Sunday and weekend workers, saying that they should be scrapped. And of course, this has brought out the unions and Bill Shorten in particular, especially since he's an ex-union leader, and they've come out and slammed it. So we're back to workplace relations, which who could have imagined this happening up until now?
So I want to come at this very strongly and say we are literally one of, I think it's like 5 or 6 countries that have the penalty rate, that have weekend penalty rates. And by far, by a large margin, we are the wealthiest country with penalty rates. And it's also led to a little quirk where people from other countries go look at us and go like, why do your stores shut down at like 4 or 5 p.m. on a Sunday?
Yeah.
Right? They sit and look at us in confusion. They sit and look at us in confusion that stores aren't open at, 8 or 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning or even a Saturday morning.
And in Victoria, we've had the perfect example in the last week of how penalty rates can destroy business. For example, we had our first ever Grand Final Eve public holiday here in Victoria on Friday.
So stupid.
And so normally what happens is they have the grand final parade in the morning close to midday. Everyone comes out for it and all the coffee shops and cafes all do a big trade on grand final eve with people buying from them. But because it was declared a public holiday, now all these places have to pay penalty rates to their employees. And so it's just not worth it for them to open on grand final eve, which means one of their biggest days of the year is completely gone for them.
Yeah. Which, for the benefit of those who maybe don't know what they are, penalty rates are essentially, it's usually time and a half, sometimes double time and a half, extra on your regular pay. So, yeah, public holidays. So, essentially it's extra money for working on a Sunday or a Saturday or a public holiday.
So people aren't alien to that concept. So this actually does occur in other places around. Other places around the world, it's kind of negotiated between staff and thing. You have to realize what happens on weekends is that there's a constraint in supply. And if there's a constraint in supply of labor, obviously the price has to go up to incite the labor to come back in. Think of it like surge pricing.
Yep.
There's nothing abnormal about paying an extra rate to have people over at night. There's nothing abnormal about people paying people more to be there on Sunday. And it happens all around the world. The difference is our government has set the rate at 2.5 times, and some people, and the Productivity Commission, for example, has basically said it's too high, right? It is understandable that you might want to pay more to get people in through the door on a Sunday, but 2.5 times is too high. The argument isn't really whether there should be penalty rates; it's about what level that penalty rate should be set at, and maybe who should set it.
Yeah, and that's something I brought up. I've actually in the process of talking to some people on Facebook about this. Like I had a friend who shared a thing. It was from the ACTU saying, if Sundays aren't special anymore, why doesn't Parliament sit on a Sunday?
Why doesn't Parliament sit on?
Well, it's a good question. It's worth discussing.
Even sit on a Friday.
Yeah,
and it's I think we could have a lengthy discussion about government services being open on a weekend. But
I want to have a 30-second gripe about this, right? Parliamentarians only are in session 4 days a week, right? For 6 weeks, 4 sessions a year, right? They are amongst, I would say, like the amount of time that they're actually in Parliament is not very much. Now, the reason why we say they should be like this is because we want them to spend more time with the electorate. But in reality, they're just spending more time at fundraisers.
Yeah.
I really want to call the politicians out on that.
Well, I mean, there's also committee work and stuff. But anyway, let's not get into that. And the relative value of this. But just to say that, it was a thing they shared, and I said, well, the main difference, the problem with a government setting the price is that not all people view Sundays. Like some people view Sundays as special. Like I personally would always choose to never work on a Sunday if I could. Like I've worked on Sundays in the past. I like my Sundays. I go to church. I want to spend time with my wife and with friends. It's important to me to not work on Sundays. Therefore, you need a higher price to entice me to work. There's other people out there who don't give a crap about Sundays. In fact, it might even be more easier for them to work on a Sunday. And so the problem with a government policy that says this is the price is that it essentially says individual preferences should play no part in this discussion. It's essentially we're saying Sunday is special. If you don't think it's special, tough luck. You're out of luck.
And the general public, they expect to be able to, whether it's a weekday or a weeknight or a weekend, most people want the flexibility to go down to the corner shop and get milk and bread. And if we have if they have those, if they want that flexibility, they have to understand that penalty rates can't be part of it. We can't keep this sacred day.
Yeah.
Well, it's no. I think that tackles onto the wrong argument because other places, like I said earlier, other places don't have penalty rates. Like the Scandinavian countries are my go-to example on this. They don't have penalty rates. They don't even have minimum wages, and they fight against the Western, the Western democracy countries such as France, Germany, such as France and Spain and England, who are trying to push this minimum wage thing through the EU.
Yeah.
The Scandinavian countries, Germany, they all don't like the minimum wage because it hurts them. They don't like weekend penalty rates because they think it's too high and it screws people out of shifts, which is what it does. The other thing it also does is it forces us as consumers into a smaller marketplace which stays open, and as a result drives up prices. So the end effect to us as consumers is less places open, places open for shorter hours, and higher prices.
Yeah, there's a lot of cafe and restaurants which say there's a 10 to 15% surcharge on public holidays. So if you want us to be open, you've got to be prepared to pay a bit more. So there is a lot of room to educate the public about why penalty rates are so punitive.
Yes. But here's the thing, right? I think from a libertarian perspective, I think we get dragged down this whole conservative line of attacking the unions, and in fact what we should be doing is talking about the economic, or rather the environmental impact of this. Maybe environment is the wrong word. But it impacts society in what I think is a negative way, because what it does.
Do you really think libertarians just use this issue to bash the unions?
Usually what I see in Australia is union bashing, and quite frankly, it's right, because the unions are responsible for this, and they don't care about the consumer. They certainly don't care about their workers, because their workers do get shafted in terms of the amount of shifts that they get, and they certainly don't care about the sustainability of business. But that's a side issue, right? I'm saying, from an economic perspective, people need to understand that you can have lower prices, and it doesn't necessarily mean people are getting shafted out of the workplace, because it just doesn't happen. People need to be offered higher prices and incentives to come in on a Sunday, right? People like Lee are not going to come in for anything less than, say, double.
and there are people who are willing to work weekends. I mean, high school
pretty
students,
much.
uni students who are studying during the week. Weekends are there, and late at night are the only times they can work.
Correct. So which is why I'm saying the issue isn't the penalty rate in and of itself; it's what the rate is set at. And I think if you set it to what is market appropriate, you'd probably find it's still 50%, maybe 75%. But more places would stay open. The price of things would come down, and generally you'd have more of a 24-hour country. And that's my shtick, right? I like being able to consume on demand. That is a big thing.
Yeah.
And most people do. I mean, you should see the panic at supermarkets, say on Christmas Eve or the Thursday before Good Friday. Everyone thinks the world's going to end because the shops are closed on Good Friday and Christmas Day. So,
you see, it's interesting. I live in a town which is basically designated by the Western Australian government as a tourist town. So essentially, we don't have to Some of the opening times and stuff are quite different for people in the town I live in. But it's interesting. The mentality of people is still the same. That is, they think that everything's closed, which I think probably factors into this whole issue, because it's not so much like getting the perception people to change people's perception is like that's part of the goal. It's not just here's the economics, this is why it works. It's actually, and I think what Vic has picked up was right, which is the personal. That is, people think it's good for the workers to make it have these punitive penalty rates because
When
they
it's
don't.
not.
When it's not, yeah, when they don't understand there's actually some workers they prefer to work on a Sunday. They prefer to work on nights.
It's good if you work for Woolworths or Coles, who can afford to soak up their extra penalty rates on
Yeah.
public holidays and Sundays. But if you're a small corner shop, it's not so easy.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, although I have to speak from personal experience because my my second job was at Coles, and I remember the Sunday shifts were pretty much like a fight where you sucked up to the boss to try and get into them because that was $38 per hour. Sorry, $38 per hour on the daytime and $55 per hour if you were on night fill on Saturday night.
Yeah.
So bloody brilliant if you can get it, and
Yeah.
you'd have to kiss ass to your boss to actually get there.
And even I'm going to venture into the area of libertarian compromise here. Even if you just kept the law which said you can refuse to work on a Sunday or a public holiday, that would still be a better outcome than having such high mandated penalty rates.
As in like without penalty is what you're saying. Like they
Well,
can't
I'm saying if you refuse to work on a Sunday or public holiday, they can't put punitive measures. Your employer can't put punitive measures in.
I'm happy with that law sticking in place. I mean, quite frankly, like employers are going to skirt around it anyway, and they'll be like, "Oh, the person's attendance is too low," or all sorts of other nonsense they can do to get around that. But a symbolic thing like that on the books, fine by me.
Because the union argument mainly is that, for progressive organisations, they're using conservative family values arguments that, it's, meant to be a family day Sunday, and, if people are forced to work on Sunday, it's going to lead to broken families.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, I mean, I think the other aspect of it is, and I guess it's sort of is a lot to do with what I just said, but I think there's just a general view of Australians that essentially is Marxist. That is, the workers are completely powerless, the bosses are all powerful, and therefore we need to protect workers at almost all costs, because if we don't, then the rapacious bosses will destroy Australia. They'll chew on the bones of the workers' children, kind of stuff. And I think it's like part of the goal for libertarians or anybody concerned with free market sort of values is essentially just say, well, actually, workers and bosses have their own sort of power within the marketplace. And I think, sort of getting that across of saying, well, actually, yeah, maybe in low skilled workers, yeah, there's a reason why they don't get well paid. It's because there's lots of them. But the way you don't fix that by making it harder to give low skilled workers a job, you make it easier for people to hire low skilled workers. So you just essentially create more demand for low skilled workers, because there's more out of in the entire universe, there's more potential uses of low skilled labor than actually there are low skilled laborers. So in some ways, there's always, I guess, theoretically, an upward pressure on low skilled workers' wages, because there's always more things you can use them for, and people just don't understand that sort of aspect of economics, and so they think, well, they're just buying the same old Marxist bullshit, basically, that has been around for however long that dickhead's been about for.
Well, actually, so it's interesting that you say that. The thing is, the penalty rates actually. So this doesn't apply in small businesses. It doesn't apply to medium businesses, but in large businesses, actually, the penalty rates give a large amount of power back to the employer, or rather the boss. Like in the example I mentioned, people would be kissing a lot of ass to the boss to get those valuable shifts. And sometimes that would mean they would actually break union regulations and, work over the 5-day limit or sorry, over the 6-day limit. You're not allowed to work 7 days in a row, so there'd be a 6-day limit. There would be people, because they really, really wanted that, that Sunday morning shift, they would hit the 7-day point, or even 8 days, or 9 days, or even 10 days. Now, if you told a Shopee union person, they'd be all like, oh, yeah. But they're not gonna, people aren't gonna.
So you mentioned the Shoppers Union there. There was that case about a month ago of the when we say Shoppers Union, that's the SDA. They actually negotiated away penalty rates in covering some workers. So there are there are some unions that are open to compromise. So.
Now, speaking of unions, that leads into our second discussion, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So, for those who aren't familiar with what that is, essentially about 12 years ago, there was a bunch of countries that wanted to start negotiating a Pacific-wide free trade deal, and what has evolved has turned into some massive secret deal that, is all with something to do with the Bilderberg Group and the Illuminati, depending who you ask, or it could be the worst thing and it could be the best thing. It's very hard to know, but nevertheless, it's happening.
So for me, this is interesting. It's essentially going to create a free trade zone between 22 countries. And when they say free trade zone, they don't mean a proper free trade zone. I mean, we could achieve a free trade zone with the world if we just unilaterally dropped our tariffs. What this is about setting up a common marketplace between them. And that's probably a better...
common set of business regulations.
Pretty much, yeah. So that's what it's pushing towards. But the interesting thing is, which union was it again? I'm tempted to say CFMEU, but like one of the unions put up this ad that was basically saying that with the TPP, the biggest beneficiary is going to be Vietnam and China. And I sat there and I went like, so you're saying the biggest beneficiaries will be the poorest countries in this deal, right? I don't understand.
The left only care about poor people in Australia or America. I mean, for example, Bernie Sanders doesn't care about the poor in other countries.
No, but so to me, that's an interesting thing. Okay, so let's pretend that what they're saying is true, like 100% true. This benefits countries like Vietnam, Thailand, basically the dregs of like Southeast Asia, the places where we go to, basically have cheap alcohol, have a holiday on the cheap, stay in 5-star hotels, get plastered every night, basically be rambunctious, Australians as we are. How is that a bad thing? I don't see how that's a bad thing. I would like to see Cambodia become more wealthy. I'd like to see Vietnam become more wealthy. I would like to see these countries raise up in their standard of living. And you know what? I think that we would benefit as well from the cheap labor. Yes, there's going to be some people on the margins that are put off by that, but nobody shed a tear when the blacksmiths were put out of work by the car.
Well, except the blacksmiths. And I mean, that's part of the issue is just that we have no idea what's actually in the deal. It could actually be just nothing but cronyism, and because certainly if you look at some of the stuff that's been leaked about the intellectual property side of things, it's...
I am 100% sure it is laden with pork and cronyism to the teeth.
Yeah.
But
all these agreements have to satisfy a certain amount of rent seekers to get over the line.
Sure.
Correct.
Yeah. But it could be nothing but rent seeking. That's the thing.
Well, in that case, it's bullshit, and we should just unilaterally do it.
Yeah.
In which case, I'd be like, yeah.
There's some good and bad in the agreement. Like, obviously, they're aiming to create certainty for businesses who want to invest in mining projects. As we saw recently, there was the coal mine in Queensland, I can't remember the name of it, that got delayed because of a class action by an environmental group. So the TPP aims to cut down on all of the red and green tape that companies have to deal with when setting up a big project, which I think we would consider a good thing, but all the environmentalists who want to shut down the coal industry, it's terrible to them.
So in many ways, I don't actually think that's rent seeking at all.
I didn't say it was.
No. So the explanations so I've seen some people argue that that's crony capitalism, and in reality, like from what the wording on those kind of agreements look like? It looks like it forces countries to return to common law understandings of the principle of standing. So like for example, we as a country are one of the people that have strayed a bit, who've expanded the notion of standing to include people that don't really have a stake in it.
Thanks to John Howard's Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Act.
Yeah, pretty much. Laws like that basically say, okay, I am an inner city lawyer sitting around in Sydney, but I have a deep, feel for environmental issues. I can, without even taking anyone's, without even taking a single signature from, or representing a single person in far north Queensland, can file an injunction to stop a mine.
Yep.
Right? That shouldn't be the case. You should at least have someone signed on to that. And I think that the ISDS or something?
Yes, they're the tribunals set up by
So I think this tribunal forces countries to return to common law principles of legal standing, which is good. That's something I like. I also like the ISDS in its entirety because it is what libertarians love. It is a private court system, private arbitrage system, which everybody has to agree to in order for it to be valid. It is perfect. It's private.
I have to address the criticism that's made by progressive groups that these private courts it's Australia giving away its sovereignty to some foreign corporation, but they've got no problem with giving away our sovereignty to the United Nations and signing up to all.
I was going to bring up just that example.
International laws.
Yeah, I was going to bring up just that example. So, like, they're always talking about, the Human Rights Council and the National Security Council, but like, yes, you're right. They're fair weather when it comes to the notion of, national sovereignty. But on this particular case, I think it's not going to affect Australia that much because we have a strong constitution, right? If we were weaker, so say someone like Cambodia, which is prone to constitutional crises, which is prone to overthrows of government, this could present to be a problem. But a stable country like Australia, it's actually a good thing. And the fringe cases where our plain packaging law comes into question, I think that's a good thing. It'll force our government to be more considerate of the Constitution. It'll force our government to really think about, what legislation they can and can't implement without attracting court cases. And that's a good outcome in the long run. It's a more libertarian outcome in the long run.
We'll also deal with the negative aspects of the TPP, which is mainly as Lee mentioned before, copyrights and patents, particularly extending the patents on medications, which is quite relevant considering we saw that company which raised the price of an AIDS medication by 4,000%.
I actually have to correct you there. So the thing was actually out of patent. It had passed its 35-year patent on that. The reason why he was able to do that was regulations under Obamacare. There was some sort of deal where it was provided to some insurance provider. There's a whole explanation to it, which I should probably link to. But no, it was out of patent. That was the underlying point I wanted to make.
Okay, I withdraw then.
But I mean, it's still there's still a lot of pernicious aspects of US regulation that seems to be looking like it's going to be extended across the world, or across the, whoever signs up to this agreement, and some of it's really kind of, not great.
So, so there's two things. People keep talking about copyrights from the United States as though, they're this big oogie boogie scary thing that has happened, because we heard all those cases of the RIAA going after, basically, standover merchant style, going over and going, you're going to give us $50 million or we're going to sue your pants off, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to like old people or kids or, or the parents of kids for downloading shit on Napster. However, there's from what I've seen in the court cases coming out of the US, particularly relating to fair use and particularly relating to downloading content on the internet. So my favorite thing was where the New York Supreme Court basically ruled that if it's on your Wi-Fi connection, since you can't prove who was doing the BitTorrent download, effectively it's not admissible as evidence of you downloading stuff. So the RAAA has to go and do more evidence gathering to present a case. And the US's law on fair use is significantly better than Australia's law on fair use.
Yeah, but there's lots of other stuff in the. I mean, it's essentially extending the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which is, on the whole, pretty rubbish. And
Yes, but
if you extend that to everybody in the agreement, like, that's a bad outcome. That's a terrible outcome.
So,
Like, you wouldn't be able to unlock your phone from or you wouldn't be able to, like, modify your Xbox or modify your iPhone or anything. Like, it is all sorts of, like, nasty. It's straight up cronyism, like, that's in the legislation.
So if you're an Apple customer, you're already vulnerable to that. So, and that's been the case for ages. It's just your other ones, like your HTCs and Samsung, because they're not based in California, that have gotten away with it.
Sure. Okay.
I don't think the impact on IP law will be as much or as bad as people think it is going.
What about including on medicines, extending Australia has a 5-year exclusivity for medical patents, and the US under the TPP wanted extended to 8 years.
It's 3 extra years. It's not going to matter that much.
So, so you don't think that it will push up the price of medicines?
I don't think it will, largely because of the PBS.
Well, that's still pushing up the price of medicine because the PBS you got to pay for that somehow. It's not for free. So
No, but the PBS has different negotiating sets. The PBS is able to minimize the cost on most things for Australians. I think that you might experience, if it's a really, really good drug, the next aspirin, say, and it goes on the PBS, it's likely to push up our medical expenditure a bit. But barring that, it's not going to impact anywhere near as much. No, I think most people won't see it. You might see some fringe cases where people complain, but the dollar amount of that is nothing in comparison to what we're going to get from everything else.
Yeah, I don't know.
Let's turn finally to the secrecy aspect of the deal.
Yeah, okay, that's shit. I'll admit that.
well, the reason that they say it needs to be secret is so that all the parties can be able to talk in confidence, and so they cannot be influenced by commentary in the media and that sort of thing.
So here's the thing. It doesn't matter if they're agreeing to this stuff in secret. The Australian Constitution, the way our law works, they're going to have to present it as a bill in Parliament, and then all of the details have to be laid out in that, or they need to create a regulatory agency that sets out those, the dealings. In either case, the details are going to be made public. Are going to be publicly accessible.
Well, yeah, except that it's basically the same reason why cabinet discussions theoretically kept secret. That is, people can argue against the position of their own special interests. So the member from X electorate can argue that X or Y legislation is a bad idea, even if it directly benefits his own constituents. So, that's the rationale. Whether that rationale is actually true is a different question, but I think the rationale is not unreasonable. Like, you want people to go into a room and be able to speak freely without having to look over their shoulder that they're going to get smashed by whatever power base is propping them up during it.
The negotiations are functioning way better than the Abbott cabinet was.
Yeah. I mean, the downside is it also, anything that's in secret means that special interests that can get access to that into that bubble have a free range to say whatever the hell they want, and people won't necessarily know. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's probably on the overall, I think, a net benefit to have secret negotiations, but it's not without its downsides.
So I think it's a bit shit in the sense that So G7, like the thing is, these international trade negotiations have always been behind closed doors, and in reality, um, the main reason why they don't want them to be out in the open is because they will affect the markets. All right. So like all of a sudden, China and Australia announce that they're looking at a new free trade deal, and they say like, oh, so we're going to look at potentially getting rid of the tariffs on rice in China, right? All of a sudden, people are going to go like, oh, hang on, rice is really cheap to manufacture in Australia. I'm going to invest money in there. I'm going to buy a whole bunch of rice futures. The thing is, it impacts these announcements impact the market in really far-reaching ways, which is why they're generally done in secret.
Yeah.
Now, should they be done in secret? I tend to lean towards no. I'm willing to accept that it will cause market havoc, just for the sake of transparency.
Okay.
I prefer I generally think that less information asymmetry in government, because we don't want information asymmetry in economics. Less information asymmetry in government is a good thing.
All right. Well, I disagree to a point. But Tim, do you have any final words before we finish this thing up on the TPP?
Yeah, well, it's not really secret because we already know a lot of the detail. I think it's just a spin that's put on it by these left-wing progressive groups to sort of say, oh, look at this, secret Illuminati thing we've uncovered. But everyone's known about this for quite a while. It's just because it's coming to the end of it now that we're starting to hear more about it.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, it's one of those things I guess we can definitely come back to when the deal if finally, eventually, maybe actually comes out of the secrecy and comes to the light. So there will certainly be more to talk about in future weeks. So, all right, well, that's been episode 28. 29. 29, sorry. I was thinking of the last. 29 of Taking Liberties. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll be back again next week.
See ya.
Bye.